So to start out with, I'm looking forward to seeing many of you on Saturday. And you all may not be aware of this, but we're in a really fortunate position here in San Antonio that allows anybody to make their own ceramics. And that's sometimes hard to come by. We have Roadrunner. They can sell you the clay. You can bring it back. They can fire it for you. So in regards to somebody wanting to try out ceramics, that's a really great opportunity. So today, rather than like have some kind of Tupperware party and tell you about what I'm selling, today I want to make this about kind of like stuff you need to know about making pots, sprinkled with some things that I just find really interesting, and so you're going to have to hear about them too. And it's going to be a little rough transition from the, hey, get ready for the national exhibit, to my lead-in, which is who's your audience? Because who's your audience will really kind of have a big impact on what you're going to make, right? So who's your audience? Min Swan Lo is not going to come to your house. And several people have amazing trees. But a lot of us just enjoy taking care of little trees, bringing them through the winter, seeing them sprout again in the spring. And we do this year after year. And honestly, when we take them to a workshop, they're like, wow, you've had this year for 3 years and it's still not looking great. And that's okay, you know. So I would say, if you're working for judges, your criteria of what kind of pots you want to make or have or buy will be much different than if it's you. You're making it for you, for your own enjoyment. Because 365 days out of the year, you're taking care of them, you're looking at them. And so whatever you make, it should be for you. Now, I know a lot of people still want to follow the rules. So I brought 2 books that I really like. And back to my name, it's Little Pots by Karin, because little pots have way less rules and they're way more fun. So you may have seen, like, for the bigger trees, we're masculine, feminine, glazed, not glazed. Sort of like, okay, I like the big trees, but I love how crazy you can go with like Choe pots, how much more color you can use. Even the Kusamono pots, that's what I like about them. You can like tell a story. Like I make oyster pots where I use a mango and I build it over a mango to where it looks like an oyster shell. Where I'm kind of envisioning the story that the finished product will tell. And I feel like with little pots like Choe or Kusamono, I have more freedom to do that. But hey, it's your tree, so you can do what you want anyway, right? But if you want books that tell you more about pots, this one I actually ordered from Germany, so was a bit of an investment, but I love it. It's very good. And it's actually, it always comes in English and in German, everything, so Kurt can read it too. But it's fantastic. It's by Ursula Funke. It's called Choe Presentation. And then, of course, this one, most people will actually already have. And it has a good section on pots and what pots to use for that. So this probably looks familiar to a lot of people because it's a great all-around book. When I make pots, I'm thinking of how I'm going to use them. And that's why I like to incorporate special features. Like I like to do the wire lines recessed, and the same with the wires for this. Just because that way I can squish it in there and it looks neater to me, right? And I do like to tell a story. I have a lot of native trees. So I'm thinking of what kind of rocks are they growing on? You know, do I want something that looks more limestone-y? Where I just envision the whole environment for them and then kind of try to incorporate that in the pot. But basically, it's your tree, it's your pot. You do what you want unless you're getting ready for some sort of national exhibit where you need to worry what somebody will think about it, right? So I'm going to send this through. Shall we? just so you can see what I mean with the recessed lines. Okay. Most of my clay I use is kind of it's called Cinco Rojo, but by the time it's fired, it's kind of a reddish brown color. And it comes from Austin. I pick it up in Austin. There's a small place called Armadillo Clay, and I can buy it in bulk. They make it there. And that's considered like a red clay, rojo. But the clay color actually comes from whatever oxides or pigments are in the clay. For example, porcelain probably has kaolin in it. And then the red clays have iron in it. And the black clays have some amount of manganese. You don't have to have the pure dioxide. There's a pigment called umber, and it includes manganese and iron, and it fires black. Now, this is actually like that Cinco Rojo in dried form. It's called greenware. It's not been fired yet. Then this has been bisque fired. It's the same one, bisque fired, so it turns into almost like a terracotta color. And then you fire it to vitrification, and it gets that darker, kind of a brownish red color. And it's similar with the red clays, where if you bought it at the store, it'd be brown like this. Then you fire it once, and it gets that chocolatey color. And then you fire it to vitrification, it's black. So these are all, this clay is called obsidian. And can you find wild clay? Yes?
Are they just time differences or temperature?
Temperatures. But we're getting to that because it's going to be important. So wild clay exists. Most of this, including a lot of what Armadillo Clay in Austin uses, comes from mines in Tennessee and Kentucky. I went to a presentation for a clay artist, and somebody who runs a studio here in Texas mentioned about natural clay occurring. That's a cone 6 clay, which cone 5 and cone 6 is what I use anyway, in Floresville, which is where I live. So of course I had to go and start digging. Can you guess what kind of oxide is in my wild clay?
Iron.
You got it, yes. So I have my own red clay. It would take quite a bit to process it. You'd have to grind it down. You'd have to probably add some other components to it to really make it for usable wear. But this is actual wild clay from our region. And you may have heard of other famous colored clay. The black clay, Barro Negro, Mexico clay. It's a lot of times they're kind of lazy looking, more ornamental things. So different, what is that? I don't know her. I could tell, what is this region in Mexico? It starts with O-A-X. Yes, I knew I wouldn't be able to say it, so I didn't even try. Perfect, yes, that's where the black clay is. So, now, here comes the sad part. And it will be the same for the Saturday people. We will make something, and I actually just taped my pattern together, right? It's a pizza box pattern that was used for all of these, right? So when the clay is fresh and still moist, and you put it together, this is the size it's gonna be, right? Then we let it sit and let it dry. And that's when it's this size. And then we fire it in the bisque firing, which is the first firing before you put the glaze on. And then it's this size. And then we fire it once more to vitrify it. And then it's this size. It depends on what I want. Like some of the glazes are matte at 5, and I like that. If I want to make them shinier, I can fire to cone 6.
You fire to what?
There's different cones, and we're getting there. Cones is just replace it with temperature, and that will be close enough.
Karin, we're looking at about a 20% decrease in shrinkage?
No, I would say like 15. But that also means like if you invest in a kiln and you have a 20-inch kiln shelf, you're not going to be making 20-inch pots because by the time fire, you know, it's not going to be like that. Grog, I really love grog. This will be one of the raffle pots, so don't drop it. Yes. And I have grog. So grog is the particles that can be added either to the clay or you can use it for decoration on the outside. So I brought baby wipes because my clay is brown, and if you get dirty fingers, feel free to use the baby wipes because it will make more sense if you actually touch them. So this one has grog in it, and this one does not, and this is the grog just by itself. So grog is like ground up ceramics that have already been fired. So you can put it back in the clay to make the clay more stable or just to give it some texture. Like I like when it's kind of like rough looking because it's a nice, like especially with other elements that are more dainty or pretty, I feel the rough look kind of gives a good contrast. If you make larger items, they will also have a little bit more stability with the grog in the clay. And there will be less shrinkage because part of it is already fired, right? Let's see. So I'm going to send this through, but I may need it back for another thing.
How did you do the feet on this? You added them afterwards?
Yes. So these pots, I'm going to pick it up one more time. So I cheat a little bit with these. I actually start out on the wheel. I throw a round pot, right, with no bottom. And then I take just the rim, just because it's much faster and more exact to throw it on the wheel than to try and shape it by hand. So I throw a round pot without a bottom. Then I just take that rim and put it on, I hand build from there. So it's kind of like a mix and match, and then I add the other items.
Karin, couldn't you also, like here, have a mold? Could you have an oval mold put that in, like you're doing with the square ones?
Oh, a pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be not as easy for me as if I just throw it, just because it's so much faster, and then I just push them to what I want. But yes, anything is possible. Like you could roll a slab, like a flat piece of clay, and drape it over a bowl you already have, and then cut it out, right? You have so many options in doing that. So vitrification is the one that shrinks it the most. When you buy a pot, what you hear a lot is frost-proof. That's what they mean with it. It's been fired to vitrification, and it's got as low of water absorption as it can have. So if you leave it outside, it doesn't just freeze and break because of the water that's in it. Basically, if it's vitrified, it's achieved maximum density before it's becoming over mature. So one risky thing if you're firing for other people, which is why I don't, is if somebody buys a low fire clay, makes something, and then gives it to you, it can literally melt and just melt all over your kiln. So there's vitrification when it's just perfect, and it has the lowest absorption of water that's for this clay, and then you can fire it too hot, and it can start bubbling and off-gassing and literally melting, like putting over your shelves.
So vitrification is another level of firing.
Yes, that's when it really maxes out on density. If you go beyond that, you can damage the thing.
So is that last spot there vitrified?
Yes, this one is vitrified, yes. So the Cinco Rojo that I use a lot, I like it because it has very low absorption once it's vitrified. Lighter stoneware clay like a B-mix has a little bit more. And then of course terracotta is very porous. That's why it's not really used in bonsai pots, because it would absorb a lot of water.
Is the vitrification occurring at a particular temperature in your kiln?
Yes, and it will also depend on what clay you have. So different clays will have different, like if you buy the clay, it will say, oh, that's a cone 5 clay or a cone 6 clay. So you wouldn't want to buy a cone 10 clay thinking, I'm just going to fire it to 5, because then it never reaches.
The vitrification.
Yeah, you got it. So a cone is this. And I should have fired one, but I didn't think about it. So you can put these in your kiln, and it tells you what kind of cone it is, 0.4. And when it fires, it's supposed to bend over a certain way. It's kind of like a control mechanism, so you can see, did it reach the correct temperature for what I needed, right? Honestly, I have a digital controller. I have these. If it ever comes out and it doesn't turn out right, that's probably when I would start using them. But my clay is kind of color-coded already for me. And I've been working with the same clay for so long to where I have a pretty good feeling when something is off. And so far, it's just been working. But that's one of these cones. Another super tricky thing on cones, they have 0.4 and 4, right? So they're absolutely not the same. If you have something that vitrifies at 0.4 and you put it in and fire it to cone 4, you're going to have your puddles on your shelves, that sort of situation. So I should have Googled why they did that, because it's kind of not great. But anyway, so here is the ones that I use with the corresponding temperatures. For bisque fire, we do 0.4. And that's where it ends up being this. And then for glaze or oxide, or even if you just don't want to do anything and just want a vitrification for your clay, it would be either cone 5 or cone 6 for the clays that I use. And then for some pots, they go in a third time. And they go in for overglaze, and that is between 0.18 and 0.20, which is like way on the other side of hot, right? Can you guess why we're doing that? Where's the gold pot? Okay, bring it up. Just, oh no. I'm coming. So only the gold pots go in a third time, and they go in for a really low temperature, because otherwise you burn out the gold. So the metal and the clay don't have the same.
So did you put that on afterwards?
Yes, it's already vitrified, And then I put on the gold solution and just put it in the kiln one more time at pretty low temperature, just enough to kind of like melt it in, but not burn it. I have messed up on this before, but guess what? I can just burn it out. I mean, it's a little bit expensive, but just burn it out and start over. So if you did look at the gold, what I love about this is that you can also control when it's going to be matte or shiny, because if you apply the gold on a glazed surface, it's going to appear shiny. And if you put it on the raw clay, it's going to appear matte. It's still the same layer, but it has a different look to it. So that is that. Oh, good. So now you're probably ready to do stuff. Yes?
How did you do a glazed layer within the unglazed layer? Did you scar it or something?
Yes, yes. So again, I kind of like contrast, like the rough clay with the kind of a gold vein running through it. And I really love geology and stones and rocks and stuff like that. So when I made this pot, I was actually thinking of like a gold vein that you would find in nature. So after I had this all finished, I carved out something that would look like a natural little gold vein, and then just apply a few dots of glaze before vitrification so that it would be ready for my gold the way I want it in the third one. So sometimes you have to think a little bit ahead of what your plans are. All right, surface decoration. This is going to be fun, and we can totally try different things on Saturday. Add clay. So this, of course, would be kind of like removing clay, right? Because I carved stuff out. When you try this out, if I get it to work, and if it's not going to work, then we're going to have to skip this part. I think it will be safest if we skip it, just because it's going to be a big mess if I... So you can just take little bits of clay and shape things out of it, like I did like a cherry blossom. And then I use this bulb. It's filled with slip. Slip is like a clay goo. I made the branches with the clay goo, and I was hoping you guys could all squiggle on it, but it's not coming out. And if you squeeze these hard when they're clogged, so we're going to skip that part. But this would be the sample for adding clay. And then the removing clay you can try, though. So just like with the little gold pot, you can just have some loop tools to create some texture that you like. Mm-hmm. Oh. And then reshaping clay, a super easy way to reshape clay is just to use something where you like the texture of, and we're going to try that on Saturday with the rocks. Did you find a rock? Good. So I went to HEB, and I found this. It's a cacao bean. I know, I'm never going to open it because it's too pretty. But it has an amazing texture, right? So you can use all kinds of textures that you find to just reshape clay however you want. And we will do that on Saturday with the rocks, when we do a rock-like structure just by using rocks to impress that. It's cool, right? I was excited. So you can also get a little help from chemistry. So we're reshaping these. I put sodium silicate on one of them and not on the other. And that means that the one that has the sodium silicate will dry really fast. So it's kind of having that cracking, and the other one will not. So this one is really bendy, it's just the regular clay, and this one will create the kind of cool textured surface because it has the sodium silicate.
What's the difference between these two?
This one has sodium silicate on it, the one that's cracking, because it leaves the other side still bendy, so you can still shape it, but the side that has the sodium silicate on it will do the cracking because it's drying. That way people who don't want to touch it can just pass it on. All right. So if you don't want to invest in much at all, here's my essentials. Cutting clay is going to be so much easier if you have a wire, and a wire is so cheap because if you're trying to cut clay with anything but a wire, it sticks to whatever you have. So wire will be great to have. I got shims because a lot of the things we make, like the bottoms, if we hand make them, we will want a piece of clay that's all even, right? So I had these acrylic shims cut for me, and I can stack them in whatever thickness I want. I would put my clay here, and then when I roll this on the shims, it means that all of my clay will be exactly that thickness. I started out with wood, but wood gets kind of bendy and dirty, and so the acrylics work really good for me. And then the other thing, plastic. And we'll get to why that's important in just a second. This is just my trash can, my trash bag. It's made from ocean plastic or something. That's why it's silver, but it's not a special thing. Just like use whatever you have. Oh, now finishing. So after it's gone through this firing, we can put on glaze. Glaze is the shiny stuff, obviously. Or we can put on oxide, and that would be part of the thing we're gonna do on Saturday. They're actually in the kiln right now, so hopefully they come out all right. But the texture that we made with the sodium silicate, that crackle, we can make that show more. Here's without oxide, and then here's with oxide, if we put a dark pigment into those cracks and then wipe the rest back off so that you can really see the cracks.
Here, do you apply that with a brush?
I use a sponge.
Okay.
You want to be kind of stingy with it. Just use as much as you need. And so I just use the same sponge for a bunch of different pots at the same time. Then I squeeze out the sponge, and I use the same sponge slightly moistened to do the wipe backs.
So will you clean off this, or do you like leaving a stain on it?
I like to leave a little bit on it, like even these guys have a little bit of darker oxide on it. So I'm not super crazy about it. It needs to be clean on the outside. Do we? Yes, we do. Another thing I like to do after the vitrification, or the overglaze, I like to polish my feet. That's done on like a diamond disc, several diamond discs with water. Probably not necessary if you don't use a very groggy clay. But anyway, touch them and you'll see why I like it. So if you put it on, what is it called? Cheetah?
It's supposed to be her.
Do I say it right? Cheetah, the wood thing? Who knows? That's exactly how I said it. So you don't want to scratch them, right? So that's why polishing the feet may be a good idea. All right. So bad things can happen. And you've probably seen the cool pots that have like a dragon on it and things like that. So if you're making big things, you need to be careful because the steam can blow stuff up. And then you open your kiln and there's a whole bunch of little shrapnel all over and you have to clean it. And the kiln bricks, where your kiln is made from, are actually pretty soft. So if they get hit, it shows. So there's different things to think of. One thing, if you can, and it's just a small thing, you want it to dry completely, right? That was not quite possible with the pots that I'm going to need for Saturday. So they're on a 10-hour preheat right now. And preheat means it stays below the boiling point of water so that it has extra time to just get rid of whatever water is still in there. So hopefully, when I open it, I will have pots for y'all for Saturday. The first firing, remember when we did the cones? The bisque firing that goes to 04, you usually do that pretty slow. You're not going to be in a hurry for that. So just ramp up very, very slowly. But really, anytime it goes above boiling temperature, you're kind of at risk. And if you do make big things, if you make your dragon pot and there's a big old dragon head on it, you're going to have to hollow it out. And you're going to have to leave a hole somewhere where the steam goes out. This is my bookend cat I made. And it's hollow on the inside, right? You don't want a solid piece. So if you make any kind of big thing, I would even hollow it out on a pot if it's like a big dragon winding around or something to reduce the danger of that. And there's more bad things. Yes?
So, like you have your film, so you know what your clay was and all of that. What happens to people that they have like the film that they've taken? How do they prevent from this know what clay you're bringing in?
So they will likely want to sell you the clay. So you'd go to Roadrunner, get a cone 5 clay, and then when you fill out the form, because you'll be filling out the form, it will say, what clay is that? And you'll put in Brooklyn Red or whatever you bought. They will be very hesitant to fire anything for you where they don't know what clay it is, just because you can really mess up the kiln if it's a lower fire clay and it's melting over it. So they'll be picky about that. I'll see about printing out some of the forms and bringing them Saturday so we can like what you need to fill out if you want to go ahead afterwards. This I actually stole from reef keeping. I used to have reef aquariums, and that's like a thing people say there a lot, and it kind of applies to bonsai too. And it applies to a lot of things really. Only bad things happen fast. And that is also true for pottery. So let's say you live in Texas and you're in a little bit of a hurry to get stuff ready for the kiln. So you don't cover it up with the plastic. And remember how we were talking about the shrinking? So different stuff may shrink at different rates, right? Unless we cover it in the plastic, which kind of contains it all and makes it like dry really slow and even. Well, if you don't, you get cracks. Because certain areas will dry really fast, others will still be bigger, and so you end up with cracks. And that actually seems to be worse the bigger you get. That's why for really big stuff, I actually prefer concrete. And I
You
have
said you prefer what?
concrete.
Concrete.
Now, be dazzled with how buff I am. I know. So the secret to that is actually that I'm not using sand. I'm using something called foam glass. And it's just a little sample, but I think if you touch it,
So, is that concrete or what was it?
it's cement mixed with foam glass instead of sand.
Ah,
So if these are only small samples, but I think if you pick them up, one in each hand, you can even in the little sample see the weight difference.
so it makes that light.
Pretty light. Like I wouldn't be jogging with it or something.
Yeah, but that other thing was dark.
Hmm?
That other tray was dark. You said you had the foam glass in that piece, right?
Yes. So by volume, you use the same amount of foam glass and cement, just like you would with sand and cement. And before you can do anything, because you'll just have like pudding, right? So before you can do anything, you build the structure from a steel mesh, right? So you build, this is built from steel mesh first. And I cut out, no, I'm good. I cut out where I wanted holes, right? And you can add pigment, like mason stains. Because if it ever chips, it will be much nicer if the concrete itself is a little stained, rather than if it's very light colored and you just have stain on the outside. Then you stain it like I want it to look a little bit like a rock. So I apply stain and then I finish it off with sealant. But this size would be like really, really difficult to achieve in ceramic. So once it goes past a certain dimensions, I feel like this is a better option.
And that fit in your kiln?
No,
No, you didn't have to do that.
it's concrete. Yeah, you just do it all in your garage or your front porch. The one really sad part is how expensive that foam glass is. So if you're like very fit, you can certainly just do it with sand. But
So how much or what denominations does it come in?
it comes in a giant bag, and the giant bag is $300
Yeah.
by the time you get it, because you also pay for shipping.
So like a 40-pound bag?
Probably, but it's very light. Like when it comes through, it's a bunch of stuff. It's a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I think there's a switch over when it no longer makes sense for me to try and do it in ceramic. So that's my show. And these will be the raffle pots.